Hi, friends. Welcome back. If this is your first time hopping on, welcome to Shakti TV. I'm your host, Shakti. This channel is dedicated to all things health and also mindfulness. So I particularly talk about health, fitness, how it affects the mind, how it affects the spirit, how taking care of the body affects the spirit and the spirit body. But this Fireside Chat project was a side project. It was something that once the pandemic started happening, and I started realizing that a lot of the things we were being told didn't make any sense. And my background, which is a background in, classical history, ufology, that's such a hard thing to say, conspiracy tracks that I have been following forever and ever and ever. They have nothing to do with the modern conspiracies. For example, the group QAnon, which a lot of people seem to be talking about these days. I literally found them a few weeks ago. So a lot of the things that they're talking about, I had actually been tracking from different sources before. I find it fascinating that a lot of what I found links up to a lot of what they're talking about, not necessarily the same source. So first of all, I'm trying a new way of streaming. So if you can hear me very clearly, please let me know. Drop me a comment in the comment box and let me know how my audio sounds to you. If my audio needs adjusting, I might be able to fix that real quick. But from my end, it looks like everything is sounding really good. And I'm impressed with the camera on my computer. I didn't think it was this good, but here we are. So let me know if it sounds really good. I'm going to go ahead and chat and type in chat box to say hi and wait on the feedback so that make sure everybody can hear me real loud and clear. This is good. This is better even. You guys are saying, all right. Wow. Learn something new every day. Okay. Thank you. All right. So let's dive into it. There's a lot of briefings that have happened since we met last. And so I'm going to cover briefings. I'm also going to cover things that are not in the briefing. And as always, I make a point of not talking about PEDO would and saying those words. And when I'm talking about trafficking, not getting specific because those are the channels that get shut down. And I don't want to be targeted for that. So always check the links section of my videos because I share valuable links that I don't necessarily talk about in the videos so you guys can educate yourselves and come to your own conclusions. But I'm just being really mindful of that because those videos are closely being tracked. So when people are talking about SRA and PEDO would, those are the people that are getting shut down the fastest. And so although I want to grow awareness to that, I'm also wanting to keep my channel and keep coming live to you guys and keep giving you guys valuable information. So I don't want to be subject to that. Just FYI. Okay. So let's go back to the briefing that happened on the 17th. Now, on the 17th, one of the things that I titled this video was repetitive announcements. And there's something I have learned from watching the briefings is you have to pay very close attention to the things that he repeats. Because every time that Donald Trump repeats something, there's a reason behind it, and there's more to come at the end of that. Something that he's repeated a few times is payroll tax cuts. He's already talked about it. I mean, he talked about it in that briefing. Did he talk about it again in the 19th? Hold on, because I wrote a couple of times when he's talked about that in a few briefings, not the last recent ones. The 17th one was the last one he talked about it. But I was like, okay, I've heard him now mention this 2 or 3 times in different briefings, talking about how some people would like to see that. And we'll see. And he just keeps going on and on about that. And the reason I find that interesting was because one of the early on components of the conspiracy theory of that this isn't really about a virus, this is about something else. One of the underlying tracks is that our whole economic system was being changed and that we were going to go from being this fiat system economy, oil money, to being back to being gold back. That was one of the things that was going to happen. It was also predicted that the Federal Reserve would disappear. And what we've learned since then is that the Federal Reserve got absorbed into the Treasury. So it didn't disappear, it got absorbed, which might as well be the same thing because it's no longer the institution that it was. So that being the case, all of the things, all of the programs that the Federal Reserve had created, which were, it's a private organization and they had private programs like income tax, would disappear. That's one of the things that was being predicted. Has that happened? No. But if you've noticed, our taxes got pushed back to July. Our things like our student loans, my student loans got pushed back to October. My husband's got pushed back to December. Some people's student loans are disappearing, which was also something else that they had predicted. So the reason I'm bringing this up is just for you guys to keep an eye on and also to track my kind of predictions, because I suspect that the payroll tax cut will disappear, that what we know as income tax will no longer be a thing. I don't know if it's going to be this year. It might be next year, but I suspect that's one of the very first things that we're going to see is the disappearance of that thing. I suspect student loans are also on the chopping block. I don't know how soon that is coming, but there's been a push for that for a while. So I have a feeling that that's going to be a thing that we're going to see shortly here. And I have a feeling that probably going to be the Democratic Party that pushes for it. They have been pushing for it, period. I have a feeling that we're going to see that come up to bat soon. So just keep your eyes open. The thing that he has said again a couple of times as well has been about the investigation on China. And I want to bring this up because when I started this video 20 videos ago, I was one of the first people to say this isn't about the virus. And number two, this virus was created. It didn't come from a bat. Okay, which that's what the WHO was saying. That's what everybody actually believed. And I was like, if you freaking believe that this virus came from a bat, then you actually know nothing about the immune system or cells or DNA. You really have no idea how that works, because it blows my mind anybody would actually believe that that's true. Okay. No, it did not come from a bat. Yes, it was a designer virus. Yes, it has a patent that is owned by someone very specific. And that's why this is very juicy, because what the president himself has already said is we are figuring out this virus came from a lab. He said that himself. It leaked from China, and there is a current investigation. So it started with him defunding the WHO and saying he's running an investigation in the WHO, and then it moved to this thing came out of a lab in China and running an investigation in China to see what the heck is going on. And then someone asked him, well, are you going to, is this our relationship to China? What's going on? And he's like, well, we had a great relationship after we signed that trade deal, but it's important to see whether this was on purpose or on accident. That's what he said. We need to know if this was a mistake or if this was on purpose. That's going to decide how I feel. Okay, he said that during the briefing. Now, why this is so interesting is because January 28th of this year, a professor got arrested for this weird relationship he had to a Wuhan university where, people were saying, yeah, he got arrested. Yeah, there was money exchange, but you can't prove that was COVID. You can't prove that was. And I was like, this dude specialized in like nanotechnology and bio warfare. Basically, that was his freaking specialty. So you're going to tell me that even though this is a crazy coincidence that he gets arrested and the students he was working with crossing the border with mysterious files in their socks got arrested January 28th, but it ain't have anything to do with COVID. I'm like, open your freaking eyes. Open your eyes, because here's where it gets even saucier. As this investigation continues, that scientist wasn't working on this on his own. He was paid and bought for by a company who was funding his research in China. And I'm just going to let it to you guys to figure out who owns that company and who owns the patent for this virus. Y'all can do your own research, but he's very well known and not very well liked right now. Just saying. Okay? So I'm very excited to see where this investigation goes, because we're soon going to find out this homeboy has been playing the biggest chess con on the planet, and his ass is about to get handed to him. I sure hope so, because completely fucked what he's been doing on like every level. Anyways, Rant over. He keeps mentioning this investigation. Keep your eyes on that, because all these random pieces, first it started with defunding the WHO, then it went into investigating them. Then it's like, okay, we know this came from a lab. Then now it's like, we don't know if it was a mistake or if it was on purpose. Then it's going to be traced back. It's all going to be traced back. And you are going to see systematically how all of this gets placed together the same way myself and a lot of other people have been saying, this is what's actually going on. This is what's actually going on. Okay. The other thing he brought up in the 418 briefing was the impeachment hoax. And he brought it up again today, talking about how an entire year, the windows in the house are filthy. Burn the house down. Yes, exactly. He talked about the impeachment hoax in a couple of briefings. And this is why it's so important. Number one, because the Democrats literally spent an entire year while he was in office putting together this impeachment. And it is actually proven to be false. And it's a lot worse than you guys could possibly understand. Not only did they falsify all of those documents that were saying that he was colluding with Russia and that's why he won the election, turns out it was the opposite side that was colluding with them. How's that taste? Medicine sure tastes bad, okay? This is bad news bears for them, okay? The very same people who were trying to take him down for collusion are about to be caught for collusion with Russia against him. That sucks. That is not someplace they want to be. But it's exactly what was his point. Every time he said this is fake, like they've got nothing, this is contrived, well, the Department of Justice is going to prove this correct, especially with the fact that the Pfizer reports are they all have mistakes. Every single one of them is incorrect and showing falsification. This is a huge problem, okay? Massive. So don't be surprised if the very first big announcement that you guys see is with the Pfizer reports and with the impeachment. There's a reason he keeps bringing it up. There's a reason he keeps talking about it. There's also a reason why he keeps talking about the investigation and the WHO and China, because there's stuff there and it's good stuff. Good stuff. Okay. So I'm trying to pick out the order of things that I want to bring up. Anybody else really appreciating the screens during the briefings? Because I am. I'm a really big fan of the screens in the videos. Mostly because my biggest qualm, and I just want to be clear about this, is not with either side of this game, whether it's Democratic or Republican. It's the media. I think the media is the enemy of the state. I think they are flat out taking advantage of people's emotions, creating panic, creating anxiety, and creating a massive divide in this country. I think that they need to be held accountable for that. That's my biggest target, is them, which is why I even started doing these videos, because why would I do these, right? But I'm doing them because I want you guys to pay attention to something other than what you're being given through the mainstream, because the mainstream has an agenda and it's not in your favor. They're not looking out for you. They don't actually want you to know the news. They want you to follow a certain narrative and a certain rhetoric. And most importantly, they want you to be afraid, because if you're afraid, you're easily controlled. And I want you guys to understand that. That's what they want. So that's the entire reason for me doing any of this. And where you really see this is in the questions that journalists ask the president. Most of these questions, not all of them, some are good, but most of these questions are not about reporting. They're about cornering him into saying something that's going to make him look like an asshole. That's what these questions are about. And if you haven't stuck around long enough to see the questions at the end of the briefing, I highly advise that you do. It becomes increasingly more obvious that the only reason they are there is to try to paint him into a corner, get him to say something that makes him look bad, write an article about it. And in fact, I have called that out. He has said something during a briefing and I said, watch, tomorrow on Twitter or on the newspaper, you're going to see this title about him. Sure enough, like clockwork, that's what gets printed, or that's what's trending in the hashtag on Twitter. It's predictable. So this is why I say, really listen to the reporters and listen with a suspended ear, because you'll see the ones that are actually asking questions for the sake of reporting on something that's happening in the world or in the country, and those that are just wanting to paint him into a corner. He usually calls them out as well. He doesn't have a qualm about saying you're fake news and you're a third-rate reporter. He says it a lot, which whatever. But he calls them out, so it's not hard to pick them out. I want to talk a little bit about this relief bill situation, because this The second bill is being held up the same way that, hi, I just saw someone say hi in the comments. The second bill is being held up the same way the first bill is being held up. And someone commented on my feed today saying, well, the first bill was held up because it was all about big business bailouts. And I was like, clearly you've been reading the mainstream media and nothing else, because that's not what the holdup was for the initial relief bill. Okay, you guys, take your blinders off. First of all, for the first time in history, there have been more small business relief than ever. I personally know small businesses in my city that got support from the federal government and were able to pay their employees. Small business relief is not a thing. Historically, it is not a thing. This was not all about big business bailouts, and that's what the hangup was. The hangup was the Democratic Party that returned the bill had an 1,000-page offer that Pelosi returned full of things that had nothing to do with the relief aid bill. And they were like, we're not signing this, right? Like, that was a contention between the sides. The right was like, we're not going to sign this bill because you're putting stuff in here that has nothing to do with this situation. And the left was like, no, we want these things in here because frankly, they saw it as an opportunity. That's the truth. They were like, well, if we just put all these things in here, 1,000 pages for a relief bill. Come on, you guys. Like, that's, you can even find the 1,000 pages. That's not, what are we doing? What are we doing? So again, there's a holdup now. They don't want to pass this bill. God only knows why. I haven't seen the pages that have been returned or the back and forth yet. It hasn't been released. I don't think. I'll find it. But just don't be so blind and believe that that's the reason that there's a holdup. Like, there's always another side to the situation and the story. And please look with more than just the bias of your party when you're trying to read the news, please. I also think it's so dumb when a reporter asks him, do you feel like it's time for appreciation right now? Or like, they asked him if it was time for self-congratulation, when this dude has over and over and over again talked about thanking everybody who works with him, all the people who built the hospitals, all the people, the military. I mean, he just constantly is thanking them for everything. And the reporters want to make it about him and how he's a narcissist and he's self-congratulating. And it's like, dude, if you don't like the dude, fine. But understand what is actually being said. And don't try to paint it into something that it's not. Because this is what I find the leftist media wasting most of its time doing, is like, trying to bash on this guy instead of reporting news. That's what I'm bored of. I'm frankly bored of that. I'm bored of liberal media trying to make him look like an asshat instead of actually listening to the words that are coming out of his mouth. Maybe if they spent more time doing that, we wouldn't be in this media warfare with no knowledge of what's actually happening. It's just, it makes my head hurt, really. Like, I'm super bored of it. I'm also a really big fan of the fact that the president defended the protests, and he was like, yeah, I understand why these people are protesting. Now, whether your personal opinion is or whatever, like, oh, they shouldn't be doing that, or they're standing too close to each other, whatever, understand something. Like, you have the right to gather and assemble, and it is not suspended unless it's something like martial law in the land, which has not been declared, by the way. So constitutionally, they still have the right to do that. And if you haven't noticed, your president is hell-bent on representing the Constitution. That's what the guy goes to, like, every single time. So it's not really about him and a personal preference. It's like, this is what it says. They can do that, right? He obviously really believes that that's correct. And he thinks that people should have the right to do that and gather and assemble, right? I'm a big fan of that personally, because to me, that communicates someone who's not interested in taking your rights. They're interested in supporting your rights. And a lot of people, when all this was happening, were really fearing a police country. They were like, we don't want to be a police state. We don't want to be shut in forever. He doesn't want to shut you in forever. That's not what he's vouching for. He's trying to open the economy. He's trying to get things moving. He's doing the opposite of what all you guys are afraid of. And he's supporting the people who are standing up against these governors that have been really tyrannical. He himself has said that the behavior has been over the top and has been too tyrannical. And he's like, yeah, I understand why these citizens are upset. That's really important, that your leadership doesn't support tyranny. So for all you guys who want to make him into a dictator or he's not a tyrant. That's not what he's trying to do. Again, open your eyes, pay attention to the people who are trying to be the type of tyrant. And it's the governors who are being extreme in these states. Like, that's what you need to be paying attention to. I also think this is important because no one ever thinks about elections for like local people. They only think about elections for the president. No one ever really wants to go vote for a governor or whatever. And then they just kind of end up in this position by default. Now you're really beginning to see why it's so important that you go out and vote locally, because where you're voting locally, that's the people who are heading your state. So when some shit like this goes down, those are the people who are making the decisions for you. So you need to be really mindful of, who am I voting into my state? Who's the mayor of where I live? Who's the governor? Who are the Senate representatives? Like, this matters, you guys. This is important, because when there is drama, like right now, you want to know that the person who has your back, who is representing your state, is going to take care of you. So I think this was very important so that everybody can see exactly who those leaders are. And I have a feeling we're going to be a lot less lazy about voting for local leadership. That's what I think is going to happen. So he also says in 419, he said, you'll find out what I'm going to do again when it came to the hoax or the impeachment. And I'm telling you, he's saying these things like, oh, you'll find out, you'll find out. Dude already knows. Dude already has a plan. Department of Justice already has a plan. It's just a matter. They are literally buying your time. As we speak, there are current grand juries happening right now. People are being subpoenaed left and right. People are being interviewed. Witnesses are being pulled up. Like, this is happening. So just sit still, because it's about to blow up in a major way. What is up? Okay, so there's a new Space Force. Did y'all catch that announcement? I shared that. There was an executive order signed for something about space, and now the president is putting together a new Space Force. There hasn't been a Space Force, a new one, in 72 years, he said himself in the briefing. And I have a giant question mark around that, mostly because who put together the first Space Force? Let's think about that for a hot second. And what have they been doing for the past 72 years, right? And why would the president want a new one that wasn't a part of the old one? Why would he make an entirely new Space Force that's not just this one revamped, right? This is the shit that makes me go, So I'm dropping that in here so that you guys do your research and see what threads you can find. Share them in the comments as you find them. I'm happy to follow your trails as well. Okay, so this is more like the briefing stuff. Now I want to get into non-briefing stuff that is really, really important. I started watching, if you guys don't follow or don't listen to Dave's X22 report, I think he's really brilliant. He does a really great job of reporting. His stuff is always on point. He does something called the Spotlight as well, where he interviews different people. And one of the interviews he recently did was Cyrus Parsa. And if you don't know who he is actually someone who filed a lawsuit. It was a civil lawsuit against major companies like Google, like Facebook, like all those, for a lot of things. And this document was kind of circling around the internet, and a lot of people were saying, oh, it's not a real lawsuit. There's typos, there's this, there's that. People were kind of tearing it apart. Osvaldo, I'll get back to you in a second. I have a few more minutes to report. Right now, we're talking about current events in this country and worldwide. Mostly, I'm focusing on U.S. news, but I'm also covering some things that are happening globally. This is part of the Fireside Chat series where I talk about current events with a critical eye. It's an alternate narrative to current events. The rest of the channel is about health and healing. So this interview with Cyrus was very interesting because he goes into that conversation about the lawsuit that he served, and he goes into why he filed it. And you're welcome. And one of the things he talks about was this whole launching of 5G and how 5G was not actually designed for humans. And one of the things he said is the 4G network we're currently on already is problematic for our system. It's not compatible for the human body, the human system. But 5G was not actually designed for us, even though it's being pitched to us as being like the next best thing. But it was actually designed for robots. It was designed for AI. It was designed to control AI. And one of the things that he really gets into, which again, I didn't complete that that interview, but this is very, very fascinating and kind of creepy shit, was about finding like things like extinction codes on certain servers relating to humanity, and how this idea of becoming one world or very socialist was actually in order to be able to control us a lot more easily. And I have been a big against socialism for a long time because of my own personal history. My family fled from a communist country and they were sold socialism as being the best thing. And it's a trap, is what it is every single time. And like, yeah, you won't have to pay for gas and we'll give you food and we'll give you whatever. And then the next thing you know, they literally own everything. You have no private property. You have no private identity. And you are 1000% controllable. And that was actually the agenda and has been the agenda for the planet for a long time. And so he introduces this idea, which really he kind of came up with originally, that 5G was to control and regulate AI, to control and regulate us. That it was never really for our benefit and for us to use, but it's for tech to communicate faster with each other to control the population. And if you guys have kept up with any of the crazy shit that is being reported in China of like cameras surveilling people and giving them credits, like social credits for their behavior, and if they align with certain the government's theologies, and they get credits, and if they don't, then they don't, and that type of stuff, that's what he's relating to. That's what he's talking about. Fascinating. I'll have the link to it below as always, but I really think it's worth listening to. The guy's obviously really brilliant and he knows what he's talking about. He's also written several books, which he talks about in his interview if you like to read and you like to read about it. So there's some other videos I'm going to link underneath, and one of them is my own video. I talk about certain symbols that are now becoming public knowledge because of videos like Falk Ball and Out of the Shadows. They're sharing a lot of symbols with you, and they're talking about, being of dark origins. I'm not going to use the word I want to use because Satanic. Again, I don't want to be tracked, but dark origins. And they're like, oh, these symbols like a pentagram and, the swirl is evil. And it's like, no, that's not true. And I made a whole video talking about how dark magic takes divine light magic symbols, inverts it on purpose as a mockery to light, and uses it for dark purposes. That's an actual technique and tactic that is used. So I will share that video link in the comments so you guys can watch it. The audio is really bad. I apologize. Facebook has been messing up my audios left and right. But it's still worth watching so that you learn about it. So the second stimulus is being held up again, and it's being held up by the same party that held up the first stimulus. And that's kind of what I was talking about originally when I talked about the original relief bill. What's really strange is that, and the president mentioned this. He was like, this used to be something that the Democratic Party really pushed for and really wanted. And now all of a sudden they're the ones bringing up roadblocks. And he just kind of mentioned that in passing, but that is what we've been seeing. So there is a second relief bill that is trying to be passed. It's just not being signed. So there's that. So I'll share that video in there. There's also a video by Jaco Boyens, I think that's how you pronounce his name, on trafficking. That's really, really good. Seems to be like a really legit resource on trafficking. He says that a lot of what we have suspected is happening is true. Not quite at the quantity and volume of rescues that we've been hearing, like 35,000 people rescued or whatever. He's like, that's not necessarily true, but it is happening. The rescues are actually happening, and there is an operation at hand. He works really closely with that. He has part of an organization that works with that. I will share his video underneath here. He has a whole Instagram series that he's doing talking about this for anybody that's interested in following that. Speaking of trafficking, Chris Cuomo recently quit broadcasting, came back from COVID, and he was like, you know what? I don't want to do this job anymore. He talked about the networks trafficking in things he didn't want to be a part of, which I thought was such an interesting use of the word trafficking. And he's like, I just don't want to be a part of this game anymore. Isn't that fascinating? I don't want to be a part of this game anymore. I thought that was fascinating that he said that. I'll share a link to that as well underneath here. But I found that to be really enlightening. Then the other thing I'm going to share in the comments below, I'm almost at my 30-minute mark. I try to make these 30 minutes each, is a video that talks about MKUltra. So this is a Twitter thread from someone, Tommy G, that I follow on Twitter. And he did a whole breakdown on the artist Lady Gaga. And I'll put the Twitter thread on here. You can read it. You can decide whatever you want to decide, but it's really hard not to look at. It's all I'm going to say. And the particular video where he talks about the glitching in celebrities was freaking mind-blowing. I watched this video and I literally was like, oh my God. It's the most eerie thing you will have probably watched in a long time. If you don't know anything about MKUltra and mind control programming, it's also a real thing. It happens. It's used in people who are in positions of power. It's a way of making sure that there's a controlled populace and a controlled messaging going out to the rest of the world. Just read the thread, watch the video. I would love to hear your comments underneath about what you thought, because when I saw it, my blood literally went cold. I was like, whoa. I know about it. I've researched about it. I've studied it. But seeing that video compiled was astonishing. That's the only word I can actually use. It was astonishing, like jaw-dropping. So those are my updates for this week. I have, just to give you guys a heads up, I do have another one planned for Friday if you'd like to hop on. Aside from these, I also drop new moon and full moon videos. So there will be a new moon video dropping on the 23rd. And I drop a lot of different videos as well that I do on different social media platforms in here. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and make sure the bell says all when you click on it, not highlighted, because you won't get updates when everything drops. But if you like current event talk, share the page, obviously, and become a subscriber. And I'll have another updated list of things to talk about come Friday. Okay. And again, to all of my patrons, thank you so much. You guys are the best. Because of you, I get to do this research and spend my time doing this work. If you want to become a patron, in the credits of all my videos on the bottom where it says, let's stay connected, there's a link that says become a patron. You can click on that and learn all about the tiers and how you become one. So I always share behind the scenes stuff on my Patreon, including my notes for all my videos. I also do EFT videos for my patrons, and I also do behind the scenes full moon and new moon events for them as well. All right. So thanks so much for hanging, my friends. I'll see you next time. Bye.